Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning, Instagram fam, friends and followers of as-Saafiy. And welcome to another episode of Revert Reflections. I wanted to begin this series of reflections centered around basically answering the atheists. I wanted to begin this series with a series of reflections that would provide important notes for believers in our quest to confirm the existence of God and to answer the atheists. And when I say answer the atheists, I don't necessarily mean that we're trying to convince them, but rather we're trying to avoid being convinced by them, having our faith shaken by their arguments. And so basically I want to give our brothers and sisters, our viewing audience and listening audience, the tools that they need to stave off the attacks of the atheists and to have answers inside themselves, answers in their hearts, answers in their minds that will prevent them from being convinced by the atheists or have their faith shaken by the atheists. So the first tool I want to give you, the first principle I want to share, is a principle mentioned by the scholars repeatedly, and that is عدم العلم ليس علما بالعدم, that the absence of knowledge is not knowledge of absence. And so, brothers and sisters, to apply this principle, a common argument that the atheists provide for rejecting the existence of God or any religious tenet, anything religious, traditional religion, organized religion, one of the fundamental arguments that they give for rejecting God and rejecting religion is that they say that they don't know that God exists because they haven't seen him, they haven't heard him, they haven't smelled him, they haven't touched him. In other words, they have not perceived him with their senses. And they go on to say, they tell the believers, how can you believe in something you haven't perceived with your senses? They go on to say, because their principle, they go on to state their principle. If you haven't perceived God or anything with your senses, they say, then you don't know that God, or you don't know that that thing that you've believed in, you can't know that it exists because you haven't perceived it with your senses. So in their minds, nothing, now think about this now, because this is a principle, which means that you have to be consistent and apply that principle to all things. But basically in their minds, if you haven't seen it, if you haven't smelled it, if you haven't touched it, if you haven't tasted it, if you haven't heard it, it doesn't exist. If you have not perceived it with your senses, it does not exist. But these same atheists, brothers and sisters, and this is where we have to be people who think. We can't just be people who receive information and just assume on the face of it that it's accurate. We have to be people who think. We have to be people who turn to our religion. And we have to be people who are prepared to realize and to be certain that our religion has an answer for every doubt, every shubha, every dubious assertion, every spacious argument. So just think about this, brothers and sisters. These same atheists believe in atoms, which they haven't seen, they haven't heard, they haven't touched, they haven't smelled, they haven't tasted. But they believe that these atoms exist. Not only that, they believe that atoms are all around us. They believe that everything is made up of atoms. And they believe in them solely because knowledgeable and trustworthy individuals, in their estimation, have informed them of their existence. So we believers, we say, likewise, we believe in God, we believe in Allah, and we believe in heaven, and we believe in hell, and we believe in angels, and we believe in jinn, all these things which we've not seen, we haven't smelled, we haven't touched, we haven't tasted, we have not perceived with any of our senses. We believe in them with certainty because we have been informed about them by the most knowledgeable and the most trustworthy people, Allah's prophets. If they, the atheists, can believe in atoms which they have not seen, smelled, touched, tasted, or perceived with any of their senses, and they can believe in them simply on the strength of the word of scientists who could be truthful and who could be lying, then we Muslims can believe with certainty in the things that we believe in. At the top of that list, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can believe in Allah on the strength of the word of the most trustworthy, the most truthful, the most pious, the most virtuous people, the most knowledgeable people who have ever lived, Allah's prophets. Likewise, brothers and sisters, these atheists, they believe that they have brains. They believe in the existence of air. They believe in the existence of electricity. And they believe in these things because they have seen their effects. Even though most people have not seen their own brains. None of us have ever seen air. None of us have ever seen electricity. But we believe in these things because we've seen their effects. How electricity makes a stereo turn on. How electricity makes a light turn on. We know that air exists because what? We breathe and we live. Without air, we couldn't live. We know we have brains because we think, we talk, we make cogent arguments. We have intellectual and stimulating discussions. We know these things exist because of what? We've seen their signs and their effects. And therefore, brothers and sisters, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists because we've seen the effects of His existence. We've seen the signs of His existence all around us. Everywhere we look, we see the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's existence. And so, brothers and sisters, this is the first tool in our tool belt in our quest to answer the atheist, not for the sake of convincing the atheist, but for the sake of avoiding being convinced by them. The first tool is what? عدم العلم ليس علما بالعدم. The absence of knowledge is not knowledge of absence. It's not certain knowledge of absence. And there are many things which we have not perceived with our senses, but we know that they exist. We know that they exist. And one of them, the top of them, the greatest of them, is Allah Azza wa Jal. More on this, brothers and sisters, in the coming days. Until then, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as always to bless your houses, to bless your spouses, to bless your source of livelihood and income, to bless your families and your children, to bless you and to make you blessed wherever you may be. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower you with His blessings and to surround you with His protection. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.